In the instructions, the Torah, the ancient Israelites were instructed to hold 3 festivals during the year. These are described in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. The simplest is in Exodus, and here we have the Festival of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Harvest, and the Festival of Ingathering. For the Festival of Unleavened Bread, the instruction is brief. Eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib, because it was in that month that you came out of Egypt. The Festival of Harvest is a celebration for the early produce of your crops that you planted in the field. And the Festival of Ingathering takes place at the end of the year when you gather your crop of fruit from the field. We have further explanation of the Festival of Unleavened Bread, or Passover or Pesach, in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. Again, it is during the first month, the month of Abib, and one is to offer sacrifice from the flock or herd at the location the Lord selects for his name to reside. That is what it says in Deuteronomy. The people are to avoid eating anything with yeast in it, but rather eat unleavened bread, symbolizing misery, because in Egypt they had to prepare to leave at a moment's notice. The festival lasts 7 days, from the 15th day to the 21st day originally, and for 6 days the people were to eat unleavened bread, and the celebration was to be a celebration, 7th was to be a celebration for the Lord your God. During this time, the people were not to do any work. And in Christian tradition, this is connected with Maundy Thursday, the Last Supper, and the date is coordinated with Easter. In later Jewish tradition, this is called, as we've already seen in a previous video, the Chag HaMatzot, Festival of the Unleavened Bread, Zaman Hairutenu, Season of Our Freedom, Chag HaPesach, Festival of the Passover. And it marks the early harvest period, the harvesting of the barley, a special offering of the Omer on the 2nd day, and one is to distinguish between matzah, unleavened bread, and chametz, leavened bread. In modern Jewish practice, Passover begins at sunset the day before Passover, which is the fast of the firstborn. There is a festive meal the first 2 nights. There is a Seder, which is the order of celebration, and a Haggadah, which is the telling of the celebration. You see a Seder plate or a Pesach plate in the upper right-hand corner, and this is a large plate with several smaller plates on which are symbolic foods. Not pictured here is the matzah, the unleavened bread. This was made in haste. It was considered poor bread and a paschal offering. Wine was also served, representing joy and gladness. There are bitter herbs to commemorate the bitterness of their lives in Egypt. Charoset, the mortar with which they had to put the bricks together. Salt water, representing tears. Karpas, representing spring and hope. And a shank bone, an egg, remembering the destruction of the temple. Additional instructions in the Bible for the Festival of Weeks, also called Harvest in Exodus, and Shavuot is the Hebrew. After the celebration of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the people were to count out 7 weeks from the beginning of the grain harvest. As part of this celebration, they were to offer a spontaneous gift in proportion to the blessing given to them by the Lord. The people were to celebrate in the presence of the Lord at the location the Lord selects for his name to reside. Again, this is in Deuteronomy. And it mentions that this is to be a celebration for everyone. You, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, the Levites who live in your cities, the immigrants, the orphans, and the widows who are among you. They are to remember how each was a slave in Egypt and to follow the regulations most carefully. And in Christian tradition, this coincides with Pentecost. And it was as the Jews were gathered in Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost that the Holy Spirit came upon the church. In modern Jewish practice, it also celebrates the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai. This is not actually in the biblical text, but it has become a tradition. It is not as familiar a feast to Jews around the world. It includes such things as reading a liturgical poem, consuming dairy products, such as blintzes or cheesecake, reading the book of Ruth, and decorating homes and synagogues with greenery. Also, as part of that, the people will engage in all-night Torah study. The Festival of Booths, as it is mentioned in Deuteronomy, in Exodus is called Ingathering. The Hebrew is Sukkot. And in modern Jewish practice, a temporary dwelling is constructed. This can take many, many different forms. And in this temporary dwelling, the people will have their meals. There is a ceremony that involves the waving of the 4 species. In Leviticus, these are the fruit, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows. In the Talmud, the later Jewish discussion of the law, these are identified as the etrog, the fruit of the citron tree. The lulav is a frond from a date palm tree. Hadass, boughs with leaves from the myrtle tree. And aravah, branches with leaves from the willow tree. In Leviticus, the celebrations of the New Year and Yom Kippur are mentioned along with the other major 3 festivals. In modern practice, the New Year's celebration is Rosh Hashanah, the first of the year. And on that day, among other things, is the sounding of the shofar, the ram's horn, which is used as a trumpet. Certain symbolic foods are eaten, such as apples dipped in honey, which is to symbolize a sweet year ahead. The Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, is also mentioned in Leviticus. And in current Jewish practice, this involves 3 to 5 prayer services, a confession of sins, a prayer dedicated to the high priest in the Jerusalem temple that hoping that that may someday come again. Obviously, there isn't one now. The people fast. This begins at sundown of the day before and ends after nightfall on the actual day of Yom Kippur. One is to have no food or drink during this period. One is to refrain from wearing leather shoes, from bathing, from using perfumes or lotions, and from having marital relations until the fast is over. There are 2 feasts. However, one takes place the afternoon before the fast and at the end of the day on Yom Kippur after the fast is ended.